Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another episode of Spoiler Sundays. So this is the time of the week where I take a look at all of the new news and spoilers that we got over in Japan for the Digimon trading card game, and, well, talk about them. So we didn't get any new news parts, but we did get about 30 new spoilers, so let's just dive right in and talk about the cards. First up, we have Wizardman X Antibody. So Wizardman is finally getting his X Antibody counterpart, and I actually think this might spawn some different variations on how we could approach a Beelzemon focused deck. I definitely think that the X Antibody cards alone are good enough to form their own spin-off on top of what we already had before, on top of the starter deck. But as far as what Wizardman X Antibody is doing, like a lot of the other X Antibodies, he could Digivolve for 0 on top of his base form. He has the nice on-play / when Digivolving ability, where we get to trash one option card from our hand, and then we get to return one Digimon that is evil, wizard, or demon lord in its traits from our trash back into our hand, so your classic retriever, and then on top of that he has a nice inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn, we get to trash the top 2 cards of our deck, further incentivizing a more mill-based strategy. So it looks like with this, it definitely wants to go all the way up through its evolution line versus trying to play your Beelzemon alternatively or warp into your Beelzemon. Next, continuing on with this evolution line, we have Wizardman X Antibody. So Wizardman X Antibody has this nice when Digivolving ability where we get to trash the top 2 cards of our deck, which is pretty good because obviously with Beelzemon we want to be at a particular trash count, which is usually 10 or more. Then if this Digimon has Wizardman or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then it gains the blocker ability until the end of the opponent's turn, so it's just acting as some solid defense while trying to help fill up our trash, which is pretty good. And it's really interesting to note that we're actually going back to the X Antibody option card, considering between BT10 and BT11, all of the X Antibody Digimon really didn't need the X Antibody option in order to function, so it's nice to see that they're returning to that. Then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability that we just saw with our Wizardman, again trying to incentivize us to go all the way up its evolution chain to be able to help fill up our trash that way. Next up, we have Balman X Antibody. So Balman X Antibody is pretty decent at being able to retrieve our X Antibody option card, which is pretty important because, well, this deck actually wants to use the X Antibody option card. Then on top of that, he has a secondary when Digivolving ability where we get to trash the top 3 cards of our deck. Again, milling is what we want to do to try to help fill up our trash, and just going up the stages and passively milling is already pretty decent. Then if this Digimon has Balman or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then we get to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon instead, so it gives us the option and opportunity to be able to utilize this card in various different ways, depending on the current state of the game. Then on top of that, he has an inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Wizard or Demon Lord in its traits, then it gets plus 2000 DP to be able to make our level 6 a little bit stronger. And then the level 6 that it seems like it wants us to use is going to be Beelzemon X Antibody as one of the SRs in the set. So I absolutely love this art. It definitely seems like it's taking a note from the starter deck art, going with that harsh line comic book style. But art aside, this is just looking to be a pretty decent Digimon in his own right. So he Digivolves for 1 on top of a Beelzemon, then he has a nice when Digivolving ability where if this Digimon has Beelzemon or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, for every 10 cards in your trash, you get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So if you just have a large trash, especially in the mid to late stages of the game, then this is absolutely going to be a win condition that you could use for the deck, just because you could swing with your Beelzemon, use the X Antibody option to Digivolve into Beelzemon X, and then use his when Digivolving ability to basically burn the opponent's security, and that swing could actually end up being lethal. So it's just looking to be a very good card for that when Digivolving ability alone, but its on delete ability is also pretty decent, allowing us to be able to keep a body around, because you may play one Digimon with Wizardman in its name from your trash without paying its memory cost, so this is just looking for any Impmon, so we could use this with Wizardman X if we really wanted to, or any of the other Impmons that we already have in the game already. And then to round out all of the new Beelzemon support, we even have a new 7-costed purple option for us to use in the form of 7th Cluster. So this actually is an ability that activates from our trash, which is something unique because we didn't really have a whole lot of this before. So from our trash during your turn, when your Digimon digivolves into a Beelzemon X Antibody, we get to return this card to the bottom of our deck, and then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest level. So the fact that one of the big weaknesses to the Beelzemon deck is it is susceptible to being able to mill itself out. This card definitely helps us prevent that mill out potential, so it's just a good card to use already, just because, well, we have easy ways of putting it in our trash. Then, on top of that, its actual main ability states that we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest level, so it's just a pretty decent option card for us to use in general, while also acting as a nice security threat because its security ability activates its main. On top of the fact that the option is a 7 Great Demon Lord, so it does work and synergize with some of our cards that are asking for 7 Great Demon Lords in terms of searchability and trait usage. Next, on to a brand new Agumon line. So we were missing the Shine line, and it looks like we finally got it revealed. So starting off with the egg, we have a new version of Quartzmon. So it's a yellow Digitama this time, and it has the inheritable ability where during your turn once per turn, when one of your yellow or red Tamers is suspended, then we get to have one of the opponent's Digimon get minus 1000 DP for the turn. So it's just acting as another source of DP reduction to play around with. Next, we have a brand new version of Agumon. So this Agumon is a pretty decent Agumon to use. So stat-wise, he is a red and yellow Digimon, on top of the fact that he could Digivolve for 1 on top of red or yellow eggs, or you could just Digivolve him for 0 on top of any Quartzmon, regardless of color. So he's just a pretty well-rounded Digimon in terms of how we could utilize our colors, just because the fact that he does count as 2 colors just makes utilizing both colors even easier. Then he has an on-play ability if we're actually going to be hard playing him from our hand to act as the deck's stereotypical digger, looking for 1 Digimon with Greymon in its name and 1 Marcus Daemon from among them into our hand, then the rest go to the bottom. So it's just a pretty decent card to use already, just because, well, those are the cards we want to be looking for, because it seems like this new deck wants to be more Marcus focused. Then on top of that, it has an inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when one of your red or yellow Tamers is suspended, then one of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 2000 DP for the turn. So again, it's just doing the same thing that the Quartzmon was doing, doubling down on DP reduction as its form of removal. Next, we have a new version of Greymon. So this new version of Greymon is still going to be yellow and red. It's still going to be slightly expensive, but he has an alternative Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve him for 2 on top of an Agumon in its name and Dinosaur in its trait. So that's just really interesting on all of the different things that we want to use it with, but again, most of the time the Agumons are just going to be good enough where we're just going to be using him with Agumon. Then he has a when Digivolving ability where if you don't have a Marcus in play, then you get to play one from your hand for free, which is pretty nice because this is good in the early stages of the game when you're still trying to develop, so you could raise, or if you just have that Agumon sitting out on the field, then you could just Digivolve into the Greymon and to be able to play your Marcus. Then he has a nice inheritable ability for us to use that we've seen on the other Digimon already in his evolution line, again acting as some more DP reduction for our Tamers being suspended. Next, we have a brand new version of Rise Greymon. So Rise is also going to be 2 colors. So with this deck, it's very easy for us to use our 2 color option cards. It's a shame that Sunrise Buster just got hit, but regardless, this is still just a pretty decent card to use for the deck, just because he has the alternative Digivolution condition where we could make his evolution cheaper by Digivolving on top of a Greymon. Then we want to go into this card because he has a nice when Digivolving ability that, again, helps us be able to play our cards as efficiently as we possibly can, where if we have a red or yellow Tamer in play, which obviously if we used the Greymon we should, then we get to gain 1 memory, so even if we don't Digivolve him on top of a Greymon specifically, the fact that we could still use this ability to make him cost 3 is still pretty good, and with Greymon, it'll make him cost 2 to evolve into, which is super tempo efficient. And then he has a nice secondary ability, which is an all turns ability, where once per turn, when your Tamer is deleted, we get to place one Marcus Daemon from our trash at the top of our security face down. So whether it's our Tamer deleting it through his own effect or whatever usage we're going to be doing with him, or the opponent trying to delete our Tamer, it's still pretty good at being able to add some extra protection to our Tamer to make sure that our Tamer can stick around as long as it possibly can. Then he has a nice inheritable ability that's basically copying his all turns ability, so that way even when we're off of this card into our level 6, we could still have access at having some protection for our Tamer. Well, more specifically our Marcus. And then we have a brand new version of Shine Greymon. So this new Shine Greymon is still going to be yellow and red. His stats aren't anything too different from what we've seen off of a lot of other Digimon of this stat line, evoing for 4 and having 12,000 DP, but he also has the alternative Digivolution condition where he could evo for 3 on top of a level 5 with Rise Greymon in its name. So you actually could use this with Rise Greymon X Antibody if you really wanted to. Then on top of that, he has a nice when digivolving ability, where for each red and yellow Tamer you have, one of the opponent's Digimon and all of the opponent's security Digimon get minus 3,000 DP for the turn, and the debuff to the opponent's security just makes it easier for your cards to want to aggress into the opponent. Then he has a nice secondary ability where during all turns, all of your Marcus Daemon cards get plus 3,000 DP and security attack plus 1, really making Marcus the center focal point of the deck based on how the deck wants to use him and all of the setup he's going to have. But as far as what the deck is revolving around and how we want to use our Marcus, we first have to take a look at Marcus to really understand what he's trying to do. So he is a 4-costed yellow and red Tamer with the ability where at the start of your main phase, if you have a Digimon with Agumon or Greymon in its name, then by paying 1, we get to have this Tamer get treated as a Digimon with 3,000 DP and it can't Digivolve for the turn. So this is basically just a hybrid, except not really a hybrid. In the show, Marcus used to punch Digimon, and this is supposed to reflect Marcus being able to punch Digimon. So this makes Shine Greymon a little bit more sense on being able to give our Marcus a boost, not only just with his DP, but his security attack plus, and the debuff onto the opponent's security actually makes more sense, so our Marcus has a higher chance of being able to survive, or at least make those 2 checks. Then our Rise Greymon, again, is starting to make more sense, because if Marcus does get deleted through combat, then he just basically goes into our security, and when the opponent checks our security, out comes a Marcus. But as far as what the Tamer is doing outside of the fact that he's just basically a hybrid in 1 card instead of 2 cards, he also has an ability where during your turn, when this Tamer becomes suspended, one of your Digimon may Digivolve into a yellow card with Greymon in its name from your hand without paying its Digivolution cost. So the fact that we get basically free evolution when Marcus is going to be swinging, again, representative of the show because he needs to get the digital code from the Digimon, which he got from punching Digimon, just seems to make sense thematically, and it seems like the deck is trying to take more of a yellow focus. And then we got a new option card for that style of deck to play around with in the form of Shining Blast. So Shining Blast is a 5-cost, 2-color option of yellow and red, and its main ability states that we get to play 1 Marcus Daemon from our hand without paying its memory cost. Then for every red or yellow Tamer we have in play, 3 of your opponent's Digimon get minus 2,000 DP for the turn. So it's acting as some good DP reduction on a wide field, so it just makes it being able to not only play our Marcuses easier, but deal with wider boards as well, while also being a security threat because its security ability activates its main. Shifting gears back to the Hunter-based decks, we have a brand new version of Drachmon. So this brand new version of Drachmon actually is making the color shift from purple to green, and he's a pretty decent Digimon because he could Digivolve for 0 on top of any level 2 with save in its description or text, and he also has an on-play ability himself, where by revealing up to 3 Tamer cards from our hand, we could return all the revealed cards to the bottom of the deck in any order to draw a card for each one returned. So if we do just have access Tamers, this is a really good way at being able to cycle through our deck and get rid of those access Tamers. Then he himself has the on-delete ability of save, and on top of that, he even has a Digicross ability of 2, so that way instead of hard playing him for 4, we could hard play him for 2 instead with any Digimon with save in its text. Then his inheritable ability for utilizing him with our other Digimon is the fact that he's going to be adding 2000 DP as long as that Digimon has save somewhere in its text. Then we did get his level 4 in the form of Yasayamon. So Yasayamon, he, like a lot of the other cards in the set, can digivolve on top of any level 3 with save in its description, so it seems like they're trying to utilize the use of a lot of colors. Based on some of the cards that we saw last week, it really seems like we want to be playing this with at least 3 colors in the form of green, yellow, and purple. But as far as what this card is doing, he has his own on-play/when digivolving ability. We get to place an Eru, Ren, or Ryoma from our hand onto the field without paying its memory cost, so it's just helping us set up our Tamers, which in a Tamer-based deck is usually ideal to be able to have alternative ways to be able to play your Tamers. Then he has the on-delete ability of save himself, and then we get to place one Digimon with save in its text from our trash to the bottom of one of our Tamers, so that way we actually are saving 2 Digimon, and he even has a Digicross ability of 2 himself, so he's technically a level 4 that we could hard play for 3 with his Digicross of any Digimon with save in its text. Then he has the same inheritable that we just saw with Drachmon of that plus 2000 DP to make our Digimon even stronger. So we already saw Eru last week, so now we get to see what Ren is up to. So Ren is going to be a 3-costed green tamer that's also a hunter in its traits, and he has the start of your main phase ability where we get to place one Digimon with save in its text or description from our hand at the bottom of this tamer to be able to help fill up his sources, to be able to use our various other abilities as effectively as we possibly can, and the reward for doing that is giving our Digimon plus 2000 DP for the turn, so he's just another way to try to DP boost our Digimon to make them stronger. Then he has an ability that we kind of saw with Eru last week, where during your turn, when one of our Digimon would digivolve into a Digimon with save in its description, by suspending this Tamer, we get to place one card from under this Tamer, under that Digimon at the bottom of its Digivolution source, to reduce the cost of that Digivolution by 1, making it so it's even easier and more effective to be able to digivolve into our Digimon and be able to add sources underneath them. Next up, we have Clockmon. So Clockmon is a pretty unique Digimon just because we don't have a whole lot of low-level white Digimon in the game, and he doesn't have any way to be able to digivolve him, so we're going to be hard playing him all the time. So for being a white level 4, he has 4000 DP and comes with the blocker ability natively, which is pretty decent at having some extra ways to be able to defend ourselves. Then he has an on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 2 Digimon cards with save in their description, and different colors from among them into our hand, and then place the rest to the bottom in any order. So it's just helping dig out our Digimon so that way we could use them for material for whatever version of a hunter deck you're going to be using. Then he comes with his own on-delete ability of save, which is pretty good because we are always going to be hard playing him. He's going to have blocker, so when he blocks, he's going to die, and when he dies, he gets to go under our Tamer, so that way our Tamers could then use him as material to use for whatever setup or situation that we're going to be lining them up with. Then the reward for using him as a material is he does come with a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has save in its description or text, then it gains the jamming ability to be able to make whatever Digimon we're using even easier to be aggressive with. And then he does come with his own Tamer in the form of Old Clock Shopman. So he is going to be a 3-costed white Tamer, and he has an on-play ability himself, where he's just, again, going to be acting as another digger. So we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add a Digimon with save in its description or text, and 1 card with hunter in its traits from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So being able to look for our Digimon and our Tamers, ideally our hunters, because, well, we'd be playing him in a hunter-based deck, is the goal of what this card is trying to do, on top of the fact that he actually has a pretty decent secondary main ability, because if you have 4 or more Tamers, by suspending this Tamer, one of your Digimon with save in its text gains security tech +1, which we know in combination with Clockmon, he'll be able to grant jamming, makes our Digimon even more aggressive. I don't necessarily know if there's going to be room in the deck for this type of a card combo, but it definitely seems like it's still something decent to think about utilizing. Next, we have Darkness Bagarmon. So Darkness Bagarmon seems to want to go into either that Dark Knightmon deck, splashing Bagarmon, or the Bagra Army deck, obviously wanting to use Bagarmon. So he's going to be a brand new level 7 for those decks to use or think about in the color combinations of purple and black. So he could Digivolve for 6 on top of a purple level 6, or he could Digivolve for 9 on top of a black level 5, which is pretty interesting, being able to have alternative ways to be going into him, on top of the fact that he just has 15,000 DP and hard plays for 16, which is kind of interesting just because he does have an on-play and when Digivolving ability, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon outright, which is pretty powerful but not uncommon on any level 7 Digimon. And then we get to place up to 5 Digimon cards from our trash with Bagar Army in its traits to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source, which again is more ideal in the Bagra Army deck just because they'll all have inheritable abilities to try to anti-tempo the opponent. Then he has an ability that triggers during the opponent's turn, which is, well, classic Bagra Army stuff, where when your opponent's Digimon Digivolves or attacks, we get to trash out 5 cards from this Digimon's Digivolution source to return all Tamers back to their hand. So he's just adding some more Tamer hate, on top of the fact that just the trashing 5 is going to be a huge anti-tempo swing based on the Bagra Army inheritables we already want to use, making him just a very threatening card for the opponent if they're unable to get rid of him. And then he has his own Digicross of Digicross -3 for utilizing Dark Knightmon and Bagarmon, so we could at least try to get his play cost down to 10 and even less with our use to be able to hard play this card and set him up even easier. Next up, we have a brand new version of Pillowmon. So this Pillowmon is a blah yellow level 3 vanilla card, but something a little bit more interesting is going to be Mikemon. So Mikemon is a yellow-green Digimon that has a very classic inheritable ability for us to use, where during your turn, once per turn, when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon and survives, which is very classic to green, we get to gain 1 memory, so it's just a good bridge to think about utilizing in a yellow-green deck. And then we got a brand new yellow level 6, which is going to be Lampmon. So Lampmon is kind of trying to interact with how Venusmon wants to play, with the fact that we want the opponent's Digimon to have a security attack debuff on them, because when we Digivolve up into them, one of the opponent's Digimon gets security attack -2 until the end of the opponent's turn. And he also can try to take advantage of that debuff himself, where during your turn, for each of your opponent's Digimon with security attack, either an increase or a decrease, then this Digimon gains security attack +1 to try to make him as aggressive as we can possibly make him, but this just seems like a filler mega for the set. Next up, we have Mermaidmon. So Mermaidmon seems to be a really decent level 5 Digimon for that Adris style deck to want to use, just because she has an on-play and when Digivolving ability to round out all of the ways we could use her. But her ability states that by placing one of our other blue Digimon underneath this Digimon to the bottom of its Digivolution source, we get to gain 2 memory, which is pretty decent because that just makes her potentially Evo for 1, which is super tempo efficient, on top of the fact that if we do hard player, just gaining that extra tempo means that we could possibly make more powerful lines of play later, and in that Adris style of deck, we have easy ways at being able to spawn a wide board and utilize those Digimon, and this just allows us to utilize those Digimon again in some capacity. Next up, we have Ancient Mermaidmon. So Ancient Mermaidmon is going to be another one of the 10 warriors, and we already knew that she was probably going to make it into the set, considering we already saw that she already had her hybrids in the set earlier in this spoiler season. So what this card is doing more specifically is playing around with that Adris style of source splitting goodness, where when we Digivolve up into her, we get to play 1 blue Digimon card with hybrid, aquatic sea animal, or aquatic beast in its traits from our blue Digimon's Digivolution source without paying its memory cost. So being able to spawn free Digimon is always good. Ideally, you're going to want to try to spawn that Mermaidmon, so that way you could gain the extra tempo and make this card easier to get into and use. And then she has a nice on-delete ability for when she eventually gets deleted, if she does, where it's your classic ancient on delete effect to be able to play one of our level 4 blue hybrids from our hand for free. And then she even comes with her own option card, which is actually a pretty decent option card to think about using in general. So even though it's a 9-costed blue option card, when we use this card from our hand, we get to place one of our blue Digimon underneath one of our Digimon to the bottom of its Digivolution source to reduce its cost by 3, which makes this effectively cost 6. And for 6, being able to return one of the opponent's Digimon to the bottom of the deck outright is just looking to be pretty decent, and it's still a good security threat at worst, activating its main. Next, we have a brand new version of Psymon. So Psymon is a pretty decent card to use in those hunter style of decks because he has his own on-play ability where we get to add one Digimon card with save in its text from underneath our Tamers into our hand. So the Tamers want to shove cards underneath, and this is a way to be able to use the cards that we shove underneath and put it back into our hand. And then on top of that, he has his own on-delete ability of save, so when he does get deleted, he gets to go underneath a Tamer, and he even has his own Digicross of 2, making him effectively cost 2 because he costs 4 normally by using one Digimon with save in its text. On top of the fact that he has a nice inheritable ability to add consistency to those decks, for us to use because of his when attacking once per turn. If this Digimon has save in its description or text, then we get to draw one card. Next up, we have Astamon. So Astamon is a pretty well-rounded card on all the different ways that we have to be able to utilize him. So we could Digivolve him for 3 normally on top of any level 4 purple Digimon, or we could Digivolve him for 5 on top of a Psymon, or we could Digivolve him for 3 on top of a yellow, green, or purple level 4 with save in its description. So there's just a lot of ways to be able to Digivolve up into him, and we do want to actually Digivolve up into this card because when we do, we get to play one level 4 or lower Digimon with save in its description from the bottom of one of our Tamers for free, and free value is always good value, but if this Digimon has 4 or more Digivolution sources in it, then we get to Digivolve this Digimon into a Quartzmon in our hand or underneath one of our Tamers and reduce the memory cost of that Digivolution by 3 instead. So instead of playing another Digimon, we could Digivolve right up into our Quartzmon, and the reward for Digivolving on top of him is his inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn. If this Digimon has save in its description, we get to draw a card, adding more consistency to the deck, but being able to efficiently Digivolve into a Quartzmon is going to be the intended use of this card. But before I get into Quartzmon, we got to talk about his Tamer first in the form of Ryoma. So this is going to be a 3-costed purple Tamer that is another hunter, and he has the start of the main phase ability where if we have 2 or less cards underneath this Tamer, then we get to place one Digimon with save from its text from our trash underneath this Tamer. So this is just pretty good at being able to reload our sources to use for material later on, and he can use them for material like the other hunters that we saw. During your turn, when your Digimon would Digivolve into a Digimon with save in its text or description, by suspending this Tamer, we get to place one card from underneath this Tamer to the bottom of that Digimon's Digivolution source and reduce the Digivolution by 1. And speaking of our Quartzmon, next we have Quartzmon himself. So Quartzmon is a really powerful level 7 for a lot of different decks to use, not necessarily just the save-based decks or the hunter-based decks. So we could Digivolve him for 6 on top of a level 6 white, black, or green Digimon, on top of the fact that he has an alternative Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve him for 9 on top of a level 5 with save in its description, namely our Astamon. And then Astamon ideally will reduce that cost from 9 to 6, and then our Tamers could reduce that even further depending on how many Tamers that we have set up. And then the reward for trying to Digivolve all the way up into him is his when Digivolving ability. By suspending all Digimon except this and all Tamers, then for every 2 suspended Digimon and Tamers in play, we get to gain 1 memory to try to make going up into him as efficiently as we possibly can. Then that pairs nicely with his secondary ability, where during all turns, all Digimon except this Digimon and all Tamers can't be unsuspended. So this is just super powerful at being able to spend everything, make him as cheap as we could possibly make him, and then stunlock the opponent's field because, well, now everything is suspended and they can't unsuspend. And then on top of that, he has a nice when attacking ability for when he's trying to aggress onto the opponent, on top of any inheritable abilities that he may or may not have, where we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers down, so if they continue to play new ones, this just allows us to stun lock those as well. And then for every 5 suspended Digimon and Tamers that they have on the field, we get to trash the top card from the opponent's security stack, acting as some solid burn and making him a very decent win condition for a lot of different decks to use. And then he does come with his own option card in the form of Gipped Particle Cannon. So this is a 10-costed green option card that we could ignore its color requirements as long as we have a Tamer with Hunter and its traits in play, and its main ability states that we get to suspend all of the opponent's Digimon and all of the opponent's Tamers, and the opponent's cards that can't unsuspend during the next unsuspend phase. So it's just trying to stun lock the opponent's Digimon down as best as we possibly can to buy us some extra time, and its security ability, even though it allows the opponent to unsuspend their Digimon, just the fact that the security effect suspends all of their Digimon and Tamers down anyway is still pretty decent. And then as far as the last 2 cards go, they're actually promo cards, so I don't know exactly when and how we're going to be seeing these promos, but these are still pretty exciting cards to think about utilizing nonetheless for their respective decks. So first up, we have Sirius Mon. So he is going to be a red level 6 Digimon. Stats aren't anything to write home about, but he actually is going to fit inside of the Bagarmon deck and kind of be their desired level 6 for that deck. So his when Digivolving ability states that by placing a card with Bagarmon in its name from our hand at the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source, then this Digimon gains plus 2000 DP, making him 13k on top of any other buffs that he may or may not have. Then, on top of that, he has a when attacking ability, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 6,000 DP or less. Then, if this Digimon's DP is 12,000 or more, then we get to delete 2 of the opponent's Digimon with 6,000 or less. So it's not a super exciting level 6 promo for the Bagarmon deck to work with, but it definitely is a fun card to play around with. And then the last promo that we got spoiled is going to be a brand new yellow Tamer in the form of Ritz Kodo. So Ritz is Pulsemon's Tamer, I guess. I don't exactly know the origins of the character, but origins aside, he has a nice ability where during your turn, when you play a Pulsemon, by suspending this Tamer, if we have 3 or more cards in our security, we get to draw 1 card. If we have 3 or less cards in our security, we get to gain a memory, basically turning all of our Pulsemons into a promo Pulsemon, which is super good because the Pulsemon deck has easy ways to be able to play the Pulsemons, wants to play its Pulsemons, and this is a good reward for allowing us to play our Pulsemons. But yeah, that's all we got this week in terms of spoilers. The set is almost done being spoiled at this point, and I think it's going to be a pretty fun set to be playing around with, and I'm curious to see what decks people are going to be building and what's actually going to be emerging as the top decks out of this set. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.